They were destroyed by their lusts of the flesh. When a country begins to embrace immorality, their demise is on the way. When a country begins to sanction immoral acts that God condemned, don't worry about their country, they are dying. No matter how powerful your guns and military weapons are, if your morality becomes a cancer, your weapons become useless. And Rome died in the bedroom. And so the Roman Empire fell apart. It broke up through strife. Look at me, please. This is important. When the Roman Empire fell apart, it broke up into small little kingdoms. It used to be one kingdom, but now it became many kingdoms. Let me name some of the kingdoms that the Roman Empire became. There was a kingdom called Franco. We call it France today. That was a Roman kingdom. The second kingdom was Spanian. We call it Spain today. It's a Roman kingdom. Another kingdom was called Portugal. We call it Portugal today. It was a Roman kingdom. Another kingdom that came from the Roman Empire was Anglo-Britannia. Anglo-Britannia. Great Britain is a Roman kingdom. We call them England today. Anglo. Light skin. Interesting, all of these kingdoms have the Roman philosophy. And they decided to expand their kingdoms. And so the French and the Spanish and the Portuguese and the British send their ships out. They are Roman in their minds, Greek in their thinking, and they come to take over territories. So they began to invade islands and continents. They came to the Caribbean, they came to Africa, they came to Central America, they went out to South America, and then they came to the Pacific. And they brought with them their philosophy. What's their philosophy? Greek. What does the Greek teach? They are superior, you are inferior. Your nose is big. Your skin is dark. Your hair is not blonde, and your eyes ain't blue, and your lips are thick. The gods gave you to me to be my slave. So why educate a slave? Why give a slave nice clothes? Why give a slave a property? Why give a slave authority? Why give a slave money? Why give a slave a future? Philosophy. And so is the story of colonization. It's easy to sell a slave. After all, they're not chosen by the gods. Now let me say something very quickly before I wrap this up. Every philosophy comes from an ideology. Ideology means ideas. Every ideology needs a theology to justify it. So every time there's a philosophy and an ideology, there must be a theology to give it credibility. And this is why religion was used to even justify the ideology of superiority. Do you know what they taught us when I was a child? They said to me, "You fell out of the sky." We had no idea where we came from. We were taken away from our homeland, and we had no history. And we'd ask the white teacher, "Where did we come from?" And they would say, "You fell out of the sky. You have no heritage. You are one of the fallen angels." Theology. They say, look, the Bible says that the beasts of the field shall carry water for you. You are the beast that God talked about. You will carry water for me. And they would teach this in Sunday school. Philosophy. And here we are now, still on the Democrat. 200 years of conviction that you are not equal to others. 200 years of miseducation that you cannot think sophisticatedly. 200 years of believing that others with certain traits are much more superior and more intelligent and better than you. Philosophy. And so they say, you must be quiet. You cannot speak much. You're not supposed to express your ideas. You keep your thoughts to yourself. Just make tea. You're not supposed to speak up when you see something going wrong. How dare you? You're not smart enough to see what is wrong. Leadership problems. Here's the biggest one. Since you were chosen by the gods to be followers, why waste my time on you, training you to be leaders? So if you study all the colonies in history, including mine, where I'm from, the colonizers never trained leaders. And what's amazing is when they finally abandon and leave you, they expect you to fail. And that's why they leave. They always say, well, of course, there are more of you than us, so we're going to get out of here in case you kill us. But we know you can't lead anyhow, so your country will fail. So they expect you to fail. Well, I don't understand that, because if you didn't train me, how can I succeed? And when you do fail, then they blame you and say, see, I told you, you ain't intelligent enough to succeed. They forget that my failure is proof of their failure. And that's why this leadership training series is important. I have come to correct 200 years of history. You are a leader. You can run this country. You can lead the world. Take a deep breath. Tell your neighbor, I was born to lead. Clap. I want to show you this before we go. Because it's so important. All the world leaders, if you study them, they're all battling with these issues. And by the way, in one of my books, I did research on what happens to a people who have been oppressed for over 100 years. And I discovered that they all have the same problems. I used a case study of the children of Israel in Egypt. They were oppressed for 430 years. And when they finally came out of Egypt, they couldn't get Egypt out of them. And as soon as they got independence, or should I say deliverance from Egypt, under Moses, Moses was their leader, and even Moses had psychological problems. Remember, he was born in Egypt. But you'll remember that when they came out of Egypt, they didn't go into freedom. They was just delivered. Don't confuse deliverance with freedom. Papua New Guinea is not free yet. You are simply delivered. You are in the desert. And why does God take you to the desert? Because He doesn't want you to go into the promised land with Egypt in your mind. So He keeps you in the desert to try and change your mentality to think like a free person. Don't ever confuse independence with freedom. Independence is an opportunity to become free. It is not freedom. They were delivered from Egypt. They were independent from Egypt, but they still wasn't in the promised land. You are not yet in the New Guinea that God promised you yet. Because that Papua New Guinea requires a new kind of mentality. One day, my wife and I went to Egypt to visit. And we were in Israel for 10 days. And we caught our flight from Israel to Egypt. I will never forget my experience. We took off from Tel Aviv. And before I could fix my seatbelt, the announcement came over the PA system. Please prepare for landing. I became confused. We just took off and we were landing. Now I thought that Egypt was far away from Israel. And so I became confused. I said to the flight attendant, I said, excuse me, ma'am, is there a problem? She said, why? I said, why are we landing? She said, we are about to enter Cairo, Egypt. I said, but we just took off from Israel. She said, yes, sir. I said, but we didn't fly. She said, I know. I said, we're landing. She said, yes, we're landing. I said, wait a minute. It's only been 20 minutes. She says, yes. I said, wait a minute, lady. I was in Israel. That's Canaan, the promised land. And in 20 minutes, I'm in Egypt. She said, yes. I became confused. I started calculating. Let's see. 40 years. Why would it take 40 years to make a 20-minute journey? Interesting question. When we arrived in Egypt, we went to the hotel, put our bags down. Our guide came later that day to take us to see the pyramids and go to El-Aqsa and all the places of Egypt to see all the pharaohs, you know, the history and everything. And we went to the pyramids and everything, and it's beautiful. And we felt like we entered the Old Testament, because that's where the Old Testament, really, most of it took place. And I said to my guide, when we were driving, I said, sir, how far away are we from Israel? He said, depends on how you get there. I said, okay, if I drove in a car, how long would it take? He said, it'll take about 7 hours. I said, what if I walk from Egypt to Israel? He said, it'll take 40 days. I said, what about the aircraft? He said, 20 minutes. I began to calculate. I said, wait a minute. If I drove in a car on a bus, it's 7 hours. If I walked, it's 40 days. If I flew, it's 20 minutes. I went back to my hotel room, confused. I picked up my Bible because I had to go and find out what happened. And the Bible says, and they left Egypt, headed toward the promised land. But God did not take them directly there. I'm quoting the Bible. Because they were afraid in their minds. So he led them the long way around to get Egypt out of their minds. Now here's my mystery. This is Egypt. This is the promised land. And it's only 40 days walk. Why would it take 40 years? And I was confused. That means he kept them going around in circles for 40 years. Do you know why? Because they kept telling Moses, we want to go back. At least we knew where onions came from. We knew where garlic. There were pots of food in Egypt. Let's go back to the British way. It's too hard to run your own country. It's too difficult to take responsibility for your own future. Take us back to a place where other people ran our lives. We didn't have to think. Take us back where they provided peanut butter and cheese. And God says, none of you will enter the promised land because you don't want to get rid of the Egypt thinking. So he led them for 30 years. Do you know why? Because 40 years is a generation. That means he kept them going in circles until he got what they were carrying. They were carrying the next generation. Joshua was not born in Egypt. He was born in the wilderness. Caleb was not born in Egypt. He was born in the wilderness. There are some people in this room who cannot make it to the promised land of the new Papua New Guinea. Why? They still want to go back. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the one right behind you. And this is why the young generation is the hope of Papua New Guinea. And I say to the older members of this great country, ask God to change your mind. Ask him to deliver you from the scent of oppression. Ask him to give you a miracle not in your body, but in your mind. Because their mind kept them out of the promised land. It's amazing. God healed their body, but never took them to the promised land. He fed them food, but never took them to the promised land. He kept their clothes for 40 years, but never took them to the promised land. In other words, God will preserve you until he gets what you want from you, and then he'll kill you. If you don't want to change your mentality, he'll bury you in the desert. Moses never made it. Not even Moses made it. How close are you to the true Papua New Guinea? Can you see it? You know, 2 hours ago, I was sitting with your Prime Minister. We spent almost an hour together today. And I asked him a question 3 times. Same question. I said, Mr. Prime Minister, what is your vision for Papua New Guinea? What do you see as the new Papua New Guinea? And he talked about what he saw. He saw a country where everybody was educated, free education. He saw a country where people had good health and welfare. They were taken care of. Diseases were almost non-existent. He saw a country where opportunity for people to own companies and to build businesses and to have share in the investment of their country. He said, I see this. And I told him, then you need to educate. You need to provide free education for every child in Papua New Guinea. Because until their mind is free, they are stuck in the wilderness. Sitting in this room are some of the greatest leaders in the world. And I believe that with all my heart. You are an awesome leader, young woman. But you have to unlearn what you've been taught by history. You must be free from the Greek mentality and the Roman ideology. You must be set free from the spirit of colonization. And believe that you can govern this country effectively by God's help. I beg you today to be delivered from Greek philosophy, because I too was a victim. Now let me close with how I got delivered. You want to know how I got delivered? Traditional leadership teaches that leadership is controlling and imposing your will on people. That is not true leadership. Secular leadership says that leadership is management of people. Leadership means you are superior to the followers. They teach that leadership means that you are served by your followers. They teach that leadership is measured by how many people serve you. This is not leadership. Please go back and invest in those books, because until you get mentally free, you'll never make it to the new Papua New Guinea. The promised land is a beautiful one. I'm afraid for this country. This country has so much wealth in it now that we need true leaders to govern it. And that's why you're here today. Maybe God is preparing you to go into political life, to govern this country in the fear of God, intellectually stimulated by the truth about yourself, where you do not harm people for your own private ambition. Here's my philosophy of leadership. It's opposite to the Romans. Number one, I believe that trapped in every follower is a hidden leader. Number two, I believe that every human being was created to lead and designed to dominate. Number three, I believe Leadership potential resides in every human being. Number 4, I believe that you were born to lead, but you must become, through a process, a leader. Number 5, I believe that true leadership is not doing things, but manifesting yourself. I believe with all my heart that the purpose for true leadership is not to maintain followers, but to produce other leaders. I believe these things as my philosophy. And that is why I travel around the world to come here to wake up the sleeping leader on the inside of you. My philosophy helps me set people free, not oppress people. My philosophy helps me believe in your equality, not your inferiority. Where did I get my philosophy from? I got it from the one who created all humanity. And here's the bottom line. Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. It says, and God said, let us make man, how? In our own image and in our likeness. Why? To let them have dominion over the fish and the birds and the animals and the trees and over all the earth and all that creeps upon the ground. Why did God create you? To have dominion. He didn't say let some of them have dominion. He said let all of them be dominators. Tell your neighbor, I'm a dominator by creation. Say it loud, I was born to dominate. Shout it loud, I was born to dominate. Tell your neighbor, I'm a dominator by birth. Tell your neighbor, I was designed to dominate. Come on, say it loud, I was born to dominate. God said, let them have dominion over the earth. So the purpose for your creation is dominion. And therefore, dominion is the most important word to you. Verse 27 says, so God created man in his own image. Watch this. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them and said unto them, have dominion. That means male and female are equal before God, and they are both dominators. Clap your hands anyhow. My wife and I are equal, but different. She's a leader, and I am a leader, but we are different, but we are equal. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them and said unto them, both of them, have dominion. In other words, the word dominion is an important word. It tells you why you were created. I did some research for you. Write it down. The word dominion is the Hebrew word radah, R-A-D-A-H. And here's what it means. It means to govern, to rule, to control, to master, to manage, and to lead. In other words, God gave you birth to have dominion over the earth, to lead. And here's the bottom line. If God created you to have dominion, which means to govern, to rule, to control, to lead, to master, then that means he built into you the ability to do it. God built into the seed the ability to become a tree. But the seed could die as a seed. Because it's in the wrong environment. For 180 years, some of our countries have been in the wrong environment. We've been fed Greek ideas. And so we can't come forth. And that's why this leadership conference is here. Not to make you superior to anyone, to simply make you yourself. You are a leader, a dominator, a ruler, a governor, a master, a controller. Ladies and gentlemen, Let me put it this way. He said, let them, which means male and female, every human being is a leader trapped on the inside. And here is the mystery of how it works. When I first met this beautiful lady, when I first saw her rather, Mother Teresa, before she died, what a woman. She was 4 feet 5 inches high. Little lady. She weighed 102 pounds. And she spoke to the United Nations. She was a nun. What made her so powerful? She discovered her gift. She discovered her purpose, her passion. Listen, please. Whatever you were born to be is trapped inside of you. If you notice what God did, God didn't just give you dominion. He specified what you should dominate. He said, have dominion over fish, birds, cattle, plants, and things that crawl on the ground. That means the only things you're supposed to dominate are fish. Check your neighbor, see if they have any fins. Come on, look around. Any fins? Any scales? Birds. Check your neighbor. Any feathers? Any beaks? Look around. Plants. Check your neighbor. Any leaves? Any roots coming out of their shoes? Things that crawl. Check your neighbor. Do they crawl on the ground on all fours? No. Then the only creature on earth that you are not commanded to dominate is another human. And that is why, in order for slavery to work, they must reduce you from being a human. And so they call you subhumans. Highly developed monkeys. Sophisticated chimpanzees. Intelligent gorillas. They just don't want to make you a man, a human. Why? If you're a human, they can't dominate you. So any attempt to control, master, rule, or dominate another human is completely ungodly. That includes even a pastor trying to dominate his members. You are not supposed to control your members. They are not your property. You are not to control and own anyone in your company. And so Jesus was living in a colony ruled by people who oppressed and dominated humans. His disciples, which means students, he was trying to change their thinking, just like we're doing today. And one day they were sitting down just like this, and he heard them talking to each other. And they were arguing, which one of us is the greatest? They must have been from Papua New Guinea. Always want to know who's in charge. Fighting over positions. And he said to them, "What are you discussing?" He heard them. And they were so embarrassed. He said, are you asking who's the greatest among you? And the Bible says he called a little child. He says, come, baby. And he put a child in the middle of them. He said, the greatest among you is like a child. A child never desires power. Two days later, he was sitting, having a meal, and two of his disciples came to him again, and they said, Mom, go and ask him if both of us could become deputy prime ministers when he become king of his kingdom. Forget the other 10. Make sure look out for ourselves, Mom. He listened to a woman. And their mother went to Jesus and said, Sir, good master, will you make sure that my two boys sit on your right and your left when you come into your kingdom? And Jesus was shocked. And he said, woman, first of all, you don't know what you're asking. You can't ask for leadership positions. He said, secondly, you shouldn't try to be like other people because you couldn't drink the cup they drink. The word cup means price. You couldn't pay the price for their position. Never be jealous of someone because you don't know what it cost them to get where they are. Can you drink the cup they drink? Leaders don't become jealous of other people's positions. And then he said these words. To sit on my right and my left is not mine to give. These places belong to those for whom they have been determined by my Father. That means you can't even pray to Jesus for a position. Ladies and gentlemen, listen to me. It's okay. Listen. Don't look at me. This is very important. And then he said these words. You know that the Romans and the Greeks, I'm quoting Matthew chapter 20. You know that the Romans and the Greeks love to lord it over one another and lord it over the people. The word lord means to own something. That's why you call your landlord. It means owner. He says the rulers of this world love to own people like they are property. And there are some pastors who got that same spirit. These are my members. They ain't your members. The Apostle Peter says, pastors, do not lord it over God's flock. The same word Jesus used for the Romans. You don't control people. True leaders don't own people. They set people free to become great. He said, do not lord it over people like the Romans do. And then he says these words, it shall not be like that among you. Because in my kingdom, if you want to be a great leader, you must become the servant of everybody. And that means True leaders serve their gift to everybody. It doesn't mean to become a subservient. It means to serve yourself to your generation, to give your gift to humanity. I'm doing that right now. This is my gift. My gift is training third world leaders. This is my gift. What is your gift? Because your gift is your area of leadership. And that's why great leaders never seek followers. They seek to serve themselves to their generation. He ends the seminar with this statement. He says, just like the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve himself a ransom for many.